The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of baseball.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
Now entering the game for Philly Press Box Radio, Bill Furman and Jim Chet Chesko.
It's Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. Welcome to the Philly Press Box Radio Roundtable, brought to you by the Irish Rover Station House in Langhorne, PA. Allstate Insurance in Westchester, PA. Cavs, Philly Tailgates, and the Edge of Philly Sports Network. I'm Bill Furman. I'll be your host tonight, along with my partner, Jim Chet Chesko. And Chet, that thud you heard last night about 11 o'clock, that was the Phillies. The Eagles bounced back with a real nice win over the Dolphins. The Flyers gained a tie on the road in Dallas and turned around and blew one in the third period themselves last night in Vegas against the undefeated Vegas Knights. The Sixers open their season tomorrow night with a load of questions, and we'll get to the bottom of that. There is certainly plenty to talk about in Philly sports.
Yeah, reminiscent of a year ago about this time, Bill, almost. The Eagles, again, having the best record in the NFC, but the Phillies, sadly, this time around will not be going to the World Series. We'll talk a lot of Phillies later on.
Yeah, a lot of disappointment around the Delaware Valley and all over the place. Just, man, what a letdown. What a letdown. That's all we can say. But on a high note, Chet, the Eagles had a high note with their effort against the Dolphins. And we're going to, believe it or not, we're going to talk Sixers with our first guest, Dei Lynam, shortly, and then we're going to talk a lot of Phillies. So we might not even have time for a whole lot of Eagles chat tonight.
And thankfully, we won't have to talk about Penn State losing another game to Ohio State. Seems to be an annual tradition. We're just going to forget that even happened. But as far as our guest tonight, Bill, for a lot of people, when you say Philly Sports Talk Radio, Angelo Cataldi is the first name that comes to mind. And when you think about 76ers coverage over the past quarter century, Dei Lynam has to be right there at or near the top of the list. A couple of legends with us on this show, Bill, and as soon as Dee gets it, we will get that going. But in the meantime, I'm still trying to get over that Phillies loss.
Yeah, well, it's going to take longer than tonight, I'm afraid, my friend. I think the hopes were high. The team was, we thought, pretty good. And, I think probably the disappointing thing to me, Chad, is they got beat by a better team. When it was all said and done, the Diamondbacks won 4 out of the last 5 games, pushed all the right buttons, while it seemed like the Phillies were pushing the insanity button. They kept doing the same thing over and over again.
Well, I disagree with you if they got beat by a better team. They got beat by a team that played better, certainly.
That's what I mean. That's how it works.
Yeah, just like the Phillies against the Braves. I mean, the Braves were clearly the better team over the course of the season for the second year in a row. But, in a short series, things can happen. And, for me, the series turned around in game 4 when the Phillies were up 5-2 and they were ahead 2-1 in the series and they couldn't hold it. And a lot of that's on Rob Thompson, if you ask me, because he knows Kimbrel has been struggling and he really struggles in the second night of pitching back-to-back. And the kid, Kerkering, had never pitched in back-to-back games the entire season, and he's a rookie, and yet he brought him in before Kimbrel. So to me, that's where the whole series turned around. Yeah, Arizona won that game to make it just 2-2, and the Phillies did win game 5, but man, when you had a chance to go up 3-1, you should have, and you blew it.
Well, I'm going to take you back one day further. I think the series turned in game 3 when he took out Suarez. He certainly took out Sanchez too early in game 4. He took out Suarez. Kerkering was in there. They blew that game. They should have won that game. And by the moves in game 3 affected all the activity in game 4, which led to back-to-back losses.
Yeah, and then what happened at home in games 6 and 7 is just unfathomable, really. I mean, Harper and Castellano and Turner going hitless in those two final games. The Phillies hit 231 in the NLCS, and we know what the big guys did when it counted, and it ain't much. But you know what? We'll get back to that later. We got to talk a little Sixers basketball, Bill.
That's right. We're going to talk, speaking of big guys, we're going to talk basketball, and let's welcome Dei Lynam back to Philly Press Box Radio. Dei, welcome. As always, it's that time of the year again.
It is. I'm surprised I'm a guest after what the meltdown that happened at the bank last night. But I'm happy to be here.
And you got your fancy Masters hat on too, so nice.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey,
it's a good day on the links.
Dei, this is an unusual time on the Philly sports scene. The Eagles are off to a 6-1 start and hoping to make another Super Bowl run. The Phillies were getting all the buzz over the last few weeks. Red October. Of course, that's not going to happen now at World Series. But quite frankly, a lot of people are down on the 76ers after their string of second-round playoff exits and the whole James Harden drama. What is the mood around the team right now as they head to open the season in Milwaukee without James Harden, from what we understand?
Without him playing, though he did rejoin them for practice. So, I mean, there is a clarification I guess we should identify. I will say that Nick Nurse is very positive. He's a guy who walked into this storm knowing what he was going to have to deal with. And I don't think it's unlike what he walked into in Toronto when he became a head coach and the whole trade DeMar for Kawhi. Kawhi didn't want to be in Toronto. Kyle Lowry didn't like that DeMar was traded. It was his best guy. Ibaka became a sixth man. So he's prepared for the storm that he's in right now. And it is a storm. And how it resolves itself or when the storm ends, I don't know what that will look like. But I think they have enough pieces. Yeah, look, going up against Milwaukee on opening night, I think Milwaukee's the better team. They obviously have made some changes also, but they have their key guy in Giannis. Now, some would say we have our key guy in Joel, but I don't feel the same about saying that a glue guy in one versus the other are equal.
The social media being what it is, you can't take much of it for truth necessarily, but a lot of rumors floating around about the Knicks wanting to make a package for Joel Embiid. Anything to that, you think?
I think you put it out there because you want to show your interest. That is not an imminent deal that will go down in any way, shape, or form. I think it's something that you float out there because there's already a problem with the Harden situation. And if you resolve the Harden situation and end up with less, or you end up with assets that are for development, at some point you realize that this is not a championship team. And so then that becomes something that you might pursue because Joel would like you to pursue it. And you realize you cannot build a contender with what you currently have. And now I have to go down that road again.
I don't want to spend too much time on James Harden because we don't know how it's going to play out. But what do you see happening with this guy? He doesn't want to be here. He's got a fractured relationship with Daryl Morey, he says. What do you see happening? And how long can they have him around when he's in this mental state?
Well, I will tell you, I mean, I've been there when he's in the gym and he does put in the work. Then he left for a while. I do think it's a cat and mouse game. I think James is a guy who is not interested in losing money every night. So the fact that they're not going to take him on this trip for Milwaukee and Toronto, then he's not the one getting fined for that because he showed up and I'm ready to play again. They're the ones making that decision so he doesn't lose money in this. And so it becomes this back and forth. Unfortunately, Nick Nurse is caught in the middle of it. He doesn't, and James doesn't have any bad feelings towards Nick Nurse because Nick to him was not part of what went down. His problems are with the front office. He no longer talks to Daryl Morey. Any communication that happens does go through Elton Brand. He does talk to Nick Nurse when he's in the gym, but Nick's not part of what's happening on the outside. So yeah, it's not like the Ben Simmons, because Ben was a different scenario and handled his in a different way, but it has a lot of the same disruptive, disturbing parts of it.
Yep.
Well, in the opener, I guess, these first couple games without him, are we looking at Embiid, Maxey, Harris, Tucker, and Melton as the starters? Is that how it's going to play out? And is that five good enough to beat anybody?
Good enough to beat anybody. No,
Almost anybody.
No. It can compete against people for sure. No, absolutely. I mean, I flat out asked Nick Nurse last week, like, can you share what this rotation is going to look like? And he honestly did not know. And there's so many moving parts to this team, partially because of the Harden situation, partially because Nick is new, partially because you lost Niang. You bring in a Kelly Oubre. You have these four centers, none of who can be stretch fours, which is ridiculous to me. The only guy who really could be a stretch four is Paul Reed, and they may eventually go to that. But right now, he's going to be your backup five. It's not a great out of the gate situation. But do they have enough talent to beat some of those lower teams? Of course.
Hey, Jaden Springer has gotten a lot of play in the preseason. Looks like he is developing. Do you see Springer as one of the rotation guys? And, how much can he contribute?
So Nick Nurse, his name came up as 9th when I asked about rotation. But Nick said he's pushing me to recognize that he's there, which I appreciate. Look, I've watched this guy in the G League. He does work his butt off. He will play at both ends of the floor. For me, my thing has always been he does not have an outside shot. And when you're undersized, which he is, and cannot make an outside shot, you're just putting yourself in a hole. And, last year he finally got over 30% from three. I'm not saying you have to live and die at the 3-point line, but you have to be able to make a shot. Like 20-something% is not good enough. And, in the open floor, I get it. He'll get up. You'll see him. I mean, he has incredible hops. He'll block shots. He gets steals. He'll keep people in front of him. He'll want to play and get out and run. But when you don't have an outside shot and you're undersized because you're a guy coming off the bench, I think you're at a disadvantage. But he's going to get an opportunity because he plays so hard. And right now they don't know who they are anyhow. So he's taking advantage of the fact that he can show how hard he works.
What do you think, Dee, that the expectation is of Tobias Harris at this point? He's still here. If Harden is not here, Harris certainly becomes a bigger piece. Where do you see that going with him?
Well, I actually think that Nick Nurse was pleasantly surprised to see what he had in the gym with him. But you guys know I'm a bigger Tobias fan over the last couple of years than other people. I think people attached his max contract to, for that, you should produce X. And my point is he consistently gives you what you have asked of him. So when he was asked to be the second leading scorer, the guy was that. Then when Doc came in and you became, the fourth guy after the Harden trade, he still produced consistently for the field goal attempts that he got. So I think Tobias will be used more efficiently and more frequently by Nick Nurse. I think he's become a better defender because of his less use at the offensive end. And I don't think that will go away. I think he will continue to take pride in it. I think he learned how to be a better perimeter defender because he was asked to. So I think Tobias is going to have a really, really good year, to be honest with you.
Got to ask you about Joel Embiid. You mentioned him briefly, but he got the MVP that he so desired last year, and deservedly so, I think. But again, there was, the playoff disappointment. Where is Joel Embiid now in his career? Is he still on the upside, or has he, peaked, and is he going to start, going down a bit now?
No, I don't think we have to say he's going down. I think he's at a point in his career, though, that he needs to show, does he want to be a leader? Does he want to put a team on his back? Does he want to be a guy who knows how to help a team or lift a team? Look, I know we're talking about the Phillies losing a Game 7 in horrible fashion because of the way the 4 out of the last 5 games went. But if you don't learn about leadership in a Bryce Harper, if you don't learn about when times are tough, Jalen Hurts is not having the same year he had a year ago, but he still finds a way to want to help his team win. Now, I'm not saying Joel doesn't want to help, but I'm saying leadership needs to be shown, right? I understand that the MVP, even though he said it wasn't the most important thing, it was the most important thing to him last year. It was. And that's now done. So show me that when times are tough, you're willing to be the person. And I understand that it's a little more difficult when you don't have the ball in your hands, right? So a Jalen has the ball in his hands. A point guard has the ball in his hands. But you know what? People pitched around Harper. So he would like to help his team. Now, last night was different, but pitching around. But he's still the guy. You feel it. You see it. And I think that's the biggest thing that Joel needs to be this year. He needs to show that he wants to be part of a system that Nick Nurse has put in place. He wants to do the things that are asked of him and show that you're the man. We know you're the MVP. Now be the man.
Yep.
I'm with you. I've been saying that all along. And I think another great examples that you gave there is right there in the NBA when it got to the finals last year, and Josic put that team right on his shoulders and was not going to be denied.
Yeah.
You didn't give me the MVP, but I'm the guy.
And don't get me wrong. It's not easy, and I'm not asking the person to do it all by themselves. Michael Jordan couldn't do it without Scottie Pippen and those other role players. So I'm not asking you to do it by yourself, but we all can identify and recognize what it looks like when somebody is the leader of a group. And that is not what he has looked like.
Dee, last thing, we would normally ask you for a prediction, but it's almost impossible to predict this year because of the whole Harden situation. I guess my only question is, can the Sixers, even with a healthy Harden who wants to be here, could they compete with the Celtics and Bucks or not?
I think both of them have gotten better, but that's on paper. We have to see how that plays itself out. I do like the changes both of those teams made. I find it fascinating. Boston was kind of forced with contract situations to have to make changes that I don't think they necessarily would have wanted to make, liking their team. Yeah, Marcus Smart was a huge part in the heart of that group. But then you go and get a Drew Holiday. Are you kidding me? Oh, my God. So I would put the two ahead of the Sixers, but more so because I don't know who is the leader of this team in our city that wants to say, come on, we are every bit as good as those guys. I don't know who that is yet. I hope it comes to, I am looking forward to watching Nick Nurse and his coaching and to see what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Dee. Well, I think we have used up all of our time already, and we certainly appreciate it. We'll get you back. How about here in a little while once we figure out what the whole Harden thing is going to be, and we'll see where direction this team's going. You can help us out then.
I totally would love it.
All right.
Thank you, Dee.
Thanks, Dee. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Have a great night. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Hey, Chet, we've reached fall. We're headed toward winter. Gas prices are down for a minute, and hopefully they stay that way. But, hey, it's time you can save even some more money with Allstate's pay-as-you-go auto insurance.
Yeah, Bill, Allstate's pay-as-you-go auto insurance puts you in control. You only pay for the miles you drive with the same full coverage that a traditional policy offers. Pay-per-mile insurance gives customers greater control over their insurance costs. See how much you can save with pay-per-mile car insurance by calling your local agent. You know who it is in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Anyway, it is Dave Lavoie. Call Dave at 610-430-0700. Once again, 610-430-0700.
All right. Hey, Chet, still a lot of football to be played. And I know they'll still be partying up over at the Irish Rover Station House. What do they got going on?
Well, I was going to say you could watch all the Phillies and Rangers World Series games on the Irish Rovers many TVs there, but I got to cross that out. They will have the TVs on, but it just won't be the Phillies. They do, of course, have dinners, and, their Halloween party is coming up. They have dinner specials every Thursday through Sunday. And then, the Irish Rovers Halloween party is this Saturday, the 28th. Drink and appetizer specials, spooky cocktails. There's a costume contest. And no Phillies on the TV to distract you from any of that. So there's that. Oh, and then later in the month, actually in November, Sunday, November 19th, it is yoga and drinks on the patio. Yeah, it's looking like it's still going to be warm for a little while. So they got one of those yoga events out on the patio. It's at the Irish Rover in Langhorne on Bellevue Avenue. Details on their website, irishroverstationhouse.com. I need to hear from Merrill.
Hi, football fans. This is Merrill Reese, and you're listening to Bill and Chet on Philly Press Box Radio. It's good!
Well, we'll get to Merle and Good and the Eagles here in just a few minutes, but let's get back and talk a little more Phillies here while we have a few minutes. You started to mention about the last two games, and I think it can't go. And you mentioned Rob Thompson, and I gotta agree 100% with you. I think what we learned a lot here was the Diamondbacks adjusted. They adjusted on the mound. They had a plan on the mound. They had a plan at the plate. Singles were killing them. Rallies were killing the Phillies, and they had a plan on the bases. The Phillies did not do any of those things.
Yeah, remember when nobody would run on some of the Phillies pitchers and on JT Realmuto? Well, Arizona said, sorry, guys. And they just played their game. They ran wild on the base paths and very successfully as well. So they got back to playing their game, unlike what they did the first two games in Philly, whereas the Phillies did not. And a lot of people say the Phillies live and die by the long ball, and to an extent that's true. And they didn't hit a whole lot over the last few games. Bohm had one last night, but that was it. Harper got a lot of wood on the one in the seventh inning that would have, I think, put the Phillies back ahead, but didn't quite make it to the fence. So the big guys did not come through. I know you don't like the word choke, Bill, but a lot of people say they did choke. And if you look at, what they did over the last two games, I could see why they say that. I don't like that word either, but
I'm not going with that. I'm going to say they got beat by a team that came out and played better than them. And like I say, if there's a blame to really be put, now Rob Thompson didn't swing the bat,
right?
We'll go with that. But Rob Thompson made some not so good bullpen decisions, not so good pitching decisions, not so good don't pinch hit for Rojas decisions. There were things that the Phillies didn't do that certainly from the managerial's point of view that could have changed this thing around.
Even with the questionable bullpen decisions, though, the Phillies pitchers, the starters had an ERA for the entire postseason of 2.19. The bullpen was 2.23, which I found hard to believe. So the problem is with the hitters and, maybe some of the questionable moves by Thompson. But they just didn't hit. They hit 231 in the NLCS. We saw what Harper and Castellanos and Turner did over the last couple of games, which was pretty much nothing. Schwarber did have the early double, but the big guys did not come through. So, yeah,
it's a good thing that swinging that sliders outside the strike zone was not a drinking game.
Well, I heard Jason Stark on 97.5 today, and he pointed out that Castellanos led the league in swings at pitches outside of the strike zone. Rojas was second on that list, even though he was up a limited time. It was based on a percentage. So Castellanos and Rojas 1 and 2 in the league, and they certainly showed that in this series as well.
Yeah, and the other one that really stunk it up and kind of got hidden a little bit is Trey Turner. He just stunk. Oh, yeah. He stunk at the plate too. The good thing about this, not good that they lost, but looking forward, I think you're going to see change. I think you're going to get away from looking for 8 or 9 home run hitters. Yeah. And you're going to start seeing getting back to baseball. Same thing that happened to the Phillies here is what happened to the Braves. They were bombers. And then when they ran into pitching that they couldn't hit bombs, they lost. And that's what the Phillies did to them. And the Diamondbacks turned around and did it to the Phillies. And they did it in a different style. Single, steal base, bunt, move runners, the way more old school baseball than sitting up there just bombing away and striking out.
Yeah, small ball. And look at the contracts. Their roster, their salaries were well less than half of what the Phillies were. Their guys, nobody was making more than $11.6 million a year, whereas the Phillies had, I think, 6 guys over $20 million a year. But that doesn't matter when you play the game on the field, and they played it the right way. Yeah, there was a lot of small ball, and it worked for them, and the Phillies had no answers.
A lot of 23-year-olds contributing in a big way for the Diamondbacks. Hey, those guys almost look like they hadn't been around long enough to be scared.
Yeah,
they were just out there playing. They were playing, and you could see. And I'm another one. I don't like that C word. I'm not going to use it. But the one thing that you do when you get in that situation is you're squeezing that bat a little bit tighter. You're trying a little bit harder. No one, Castellanos doesn't want to go up there and go 0 for 24 with 12 strikeouts. He doesn't want to do that. He's a pro. But you start trying a little bit too hard, and when you're trying too hard, bad things happen again. It doesn't get better that way. So, tough way to go out. That's for sure.
Harper had 0 hits in the 4 losses. For the entire series, Harper hit only 217. Turner hit 200. Castellanos, who homered in his very first at bat, and then 0 for his next 23, hit 0-42. So those 3 big guys did not come through at all.
Yeah. And I think you also have to go back to Craig Kimbrell. I think we knew through the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, that his arm was dead.
Yep.
He struggled mightily down the stretch, and he got in. The guy's a Hall of Famer probably, but he gets into this situation and he couldn't get anybody out. Kirkring was in over his head. He should have never been on that roster. Everybody got excited because he struck out the side in his first outing. Not the place for him to be. The lights were just a little too bright for him. He might be a future star.
Yeah, one of the criticisms of Rob Thompson is that he's a little too loyal to his guys. So he was unwilling to, make changes in the batting order in the postseason. He was unwilling to not go to Craig Kimbrell just because, Kimbrell was an all-star who did a lot for the team during the season. But, anybody with eyes could tell that Kimbrell was pretty much shot by the time we got to the NLCS. And Thompson, I think, to a fault, was just too loyal.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, and one final comment on that, the best right-hander he had out there was Hoffman.
Yeah.
And he was using him in the 3rd inning, the 5th inning, in situations. He needed outs in the 3rd or 5th inning, but maybe that was where Dominguez could have been. And then Hoffman could have been there to get the final outs when they needed them.
Bill, on our show next week, we're going to get into the whole autopsy thing and the future thing as far as, what's going to happen, who's going to stay, who's going to go, what do the Phillies need to do. So that'll be a prime topic for next week's show.
All right. Well, in the meantime, let's squeeze in just a few minutes of Eagles talk, Chet. Nice bounce back win over the Dolphins on Sunday night. Fantastic defensive effort against the high-flying Dolphins.
Yeah, they looked really good. Primetime game, and the Eagles certainly came to play. The defense looked terrific. Jalen Hurts, I thought, had a real good game other than the fumble. So he made some real nice throws. And A.J. Brown is just incredible. He is on quite a streak right now with these 125-yard plus receiving games.
Yeah, well, I think of the 17 points, I think 10 of them were on Hurts. One was the fumble and one was the interception.
Yep.
So only 7 points given up. Nice drop by Tyreek Hill. Certainly helped when at the time when the game was close. Tyreek Hill is really good too. But, thing I liked about that game after we saw what happened with it, the Eagles came out in the football. And when they run the football, they're going to be pretty successful. That offensive line is still good. Then you start mixing in, do it the old school way and start mixing in the pass. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, all good.
And we'll forgive Lane Johnson for giving up his first sack in 100 years.
Yeah, I'm going with it. Lane was maybe 70% healthy in that game, just because I really tried to spend a lot of time watching him. He did give up that sack, but he was blocking, but he wasn't moving his feet. He was just trying to get his body in position because I think that ankle was, was really a lot worse, and he was gutting through that.
Well, Lane Johnson at 70% is still better than 90% of offensive linemen around the league, I think.
Absolutely. And if he only gave up one sack, that's pretty good. Good job by the Eagles fans, too, and the Phillies fans. We got to get back to that, too, for just a second. Yeah. The Philadelphia fans as a whole really showed up through all this, and good stuff.
On a side note, if I never hear Dancing on My Own again, I'll be okay with that.
You probably won't. Around the ballpark, anyway, I think. What they say, that's now a loser song. So,
yes,
we're not doing that. But, good stuff. And the Commanders coming up this Sunday. We know that's going to be tough. It always seems to be.
Yeah, Washington always plays the Birds tough, and I fully expect that to be the case again this weekend. It is down there, though. Merrill Reese's favorite or unfavorite visiting stadium. He hates going down there to FedEx Field, but I do think the Eagles will prevail. We'll get to our picks later, but always a tough game with those two teams.
You bet. All right, let's give a shout out to all the shows over at the Edge of Philly Sports Network this week. The gang has all the bases covered. You can also catch all the action on www.eopsports.com, as well as Edge of Philly Sports on YouTube. You can also find our show on the Philly Press Box Radio YouTube channel. Help us out by hitting those subscribe, follow, like buttons, and as always, share with your family and friends. As you can see from the graphic, we got something going on every night, talking all things Philly sports.
And don't forget, we occasionally get asked about our audio podcast versions of our show. They've pretty much been impossible to find since back in March, but they are now again available on Spotify and on Amazon Music. So if you use Spotify, either the website or the app, you just open that up and you will see the green Philly Press Box Radio logo, and you'll see some of the recent shows on there. So you can click on those. If you use Amazon Music, meanwhile, well, they're on there as well. Search for Philly Press Box or Philly Press Box Radio and look for the green logo, not the red one. That's the older shows from back in March and before that. You will see several of our recent shows on there, like last week's with Frank Close, or the one before that with Bob Kelly and Kate Scott. So we're on Amazon Music and Spotify, and hopefully getting back on Apple Podcasts very soon. So find us.
And while you're at it, tell them about Twitter. Or X.
Yes,
whatever we are today.
People may know we got hacked several months ago. Someone just stole our old Twitter page, so now we have a new one. It is Philly Press Box Radio. If you're looking for it, type it in there in the search bar with the spaces, Philly space Press Box space Radio. And I think for now anyway, it's at Press Box Guys is what the the @ is at Pressbox Guys, but you'll see us on there. And that one is our red logo and you and me right above there in the little cover picture.
Okay, so I'm not a big X guy or Twitter guy or whatever. So if I went to search, I can just put in Philly Pressbox Radio, not at Philly Guys.
Right. But you may see the old one coming up first still. So look for the new one with the red round logo and you and me, our smiling faces in the cover picture.
Gotcha. Okay. Hey, PJ sent you a note. I just didn't want this to go by.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll get to our picks later.
All right. Well, hey, Chet, you had a chance to visit with Philadelphia WIP radio legend Angelo Cataldi the other day. How is Angelo enjoying retirement, and how was your visit with him?
He's definitely enjoying retirement. Hey, who wouldn't? Since retiring in February, he made time to write a book that I can't wait to read. He and his wife went on a trip to California wine country last month, and he can sleep in most days. But yeah, he and I had a fantastic conversation about the new book and more. And here is that chat. Fun when we welcome a first-time visitor to Philly Pressbox Radio. And this one should be a real blast. I'm very happy to say hello to a legend in Philly sports talk radio, Angelo Cataldi. Hey, Angelo.
Chad, it's a pleasure to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, Angelo, we'll talk about your new book, Loud, in just a minute. But after 33 years at WIP, you've been retired from that gig now 8 or 9 months. How is retirement? And do you miss anything about morning talk radio?
I don't miss much of it. I certainly don't miss getting up at 2:30 in the morning to do that show. But after 33 years, it takes a little adjustment not to do it anymore. And I got to tell you, Chet, a couple of times this year, the Eagles coaches have frustrated the heck out of me. And I realize after a bad loss like the one with the Jets last week, that it sticks with me more. It was therapeutic to go on the day after an awful game like that loss to the Jets and yell and scream. By 9 o'clock, I felt better. I don't have that outlet anymore, and it's a little bit harder for me. But my day is come and gone, and I accept that fully now. And I'm glad there are other people doing it very capably over at WIP.
Hey, I saw you and talked to you down at the Collingswood Book Fest a couple of weeks back. And folks who came to see you, you told them about how the book came about and how you were able to write the whole thing in, I guess, 6 weeks. And I think you mentioned that the publisher had some different ideas about the book's title and the front cover pictures. Tell us about that.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you're holding up the pamphlet we handed out at that, because this is a debut. I have not shown this to anyone yet. Ooh. I just got it yesterday. I have the actual book. I got the book. It's out. It's not out, but they sent me my first box of them, and it's just thrilling to hold a book in your hand that you wrote. You know, that's like an amazing thing. The process itself, it just became a question of timing for me. One thing I learned from doing WIP for so many years was you got to take advantage of the moment. And the moment for me would be the same year I retired to have the book out. So I went to a lot of publishers and said, I need to publish it this year. I need it out before the holidays. And they all said no, except one, Triumph Publishing in Chicago, which had done a great job with Todd Zalecki's book, Doc, about Roy Halladay. They came to me and we talked, and they understood the immediacy of it, and they agreed to do it.
I think you said they wanted you to look like, pensive and just sitting there.
Oh, well, here's the story. I mean, having a publisher in the middle of the country, they don't really know me.
Exactly.
They read the book and they know that I'm kind of loud and demonstrative. They didn't really grasp the need in the book to have me enunciating, yelling and screaming the way I did in the show. So they came to me and they wanted to use a picture from like one of the early shoots I had done for a magazine piece. And I said, that's not really me. Give me a week and I'll get somebody and I'll send you photos that reflect what my 33 years was like. And I got a great photographer, Allison Dunlap, in Jersey. She shot it and we got them back to him in 3 or 4 days. And they went, wow, this is definitely better than what we had in mind. So sometimes you got to take control of your own destiny. And
Exactly.
the destiny was, if I wanted the right product out, I had to assert myself, and I did.
Hey, Angelo, you were on with your former colleague, Mike Missinelli, on his podcast a couple of times this year, and you guys had a great discussion recently about your on-air persona versus your real-life personality. I think you actually described yourself as highly inept socially in real life, but very, very different on the radio. So who is the real Angelo Cataldi today after 33 years on the radio?
Yeah. What happened over that time, Chet, is that my real personality, my off-the-air personality, began to blend with my on-air personality to the point where it almost became indistinguishable, except in social settings. Like on the air, bringing on a caller, I felt totally comfortable in small talk and, really engaging. Not so much in a cocktail hour situation or a wedding or something like that. That never changed. But now they're starting to separate again. And I'm finding more of the serious writer type that I was prior to that. I had worked at the Inquirer and I went to Columbia Journalism School. That personality, that part of my personality seems to be reemerging, which is another way of saying I'm becoming more boring. But maybe a little more calm about certain situations than I was on the radio. It was important on the radio to really punch home your point, to amplify, to make it dramatic and entertaining. And that was the plan then. And now the plan now is, now that I've written the book, it's like now I have to be that writer again too. So it's separating some. But I did enjoy it, man. I had that part of my personality, that loud and demonstrative and crazy personality was so much fun. And I had such a great time being that person.
Hey, well, as your WIP show got more popular over the years, I think you always had pretty solid ratings. You got a certain degree of power. In fact, it led to you having a rather unusual stipulation in your contract regarding legendary station manager Tom Bigby. Tell us about that.
Well, I think in the book, people are going to, I wonder when I was writing it, if people were to think I was a real prima donna, which actually maybe I was. But this gentleman here that you're seeing on the screen, Tom Bigby, was probably as instrumental as anyone in my success because he was a very intelligent radio guy. And he was teaching radio to a guy who knew nothing about radio. I was a newspaper writer. And the first 2 years, he taught me how to go in and out of breaks, how to give time checks, or how to keep the rhythm of a show going. He was great at it. He used to tell me the greatest song ever written was a song called The Letter, right?
Yeah, the box stops.
Yeah. And he said to me that it was the best song for a DJ because it was 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And he said, caller should be more than 2 minutes and 12 seconds. Well, initially I bought in and I did it that way until I realized that some callers were great and 3 minutes of their conversation was terrific. And some callers, a minute was too much. So that's where his influence started to wane after a couple of years. And then he started to get involved in the content on what was an important thing to talk about, what wasn't. And I mean, he didn't know anything about that. He was completely clueless about it. And that's when we began to engage in some epic fights, to the point that in 1995, when I was negotiating a new contract, I had told my agent I didn't think I could stay. I didn't think I could work with that guy. And he said, let me work on this. Maybe I can do something about that. And he put a clause in my contract which said that Tom Bigby, my boss, could not speak to me unless I wanted him to. It was my decision. And a couple of years later, he interrupted a show very early on when we were talking about Mike Tyson biting the earlobe off of Evander Holyfield. And he said he didn't want me talking about it. And I said, I'm going to talk about it. And I am no longer going to speak to you. And he didn't even know about the clause.
Oh,
that's how he found out about the clause. And let's just say after that, it was a bumpy ride. But I cannot write that book. I cannot talk about that without acknowledging that without the lessons he taught me in the first couple of years, I was doomed, because I didn't know how to do a radio show, and he showed me how to do that.
I could talk with you for hours about dozens more topics, but in the interest of time, let's finish up with something called Fast Five. First of all, number one, your first year on WIP was this last as Eagles head coach. What was your view of Buddy Ryan?
Buddy Ryan, love, hate like no one else. Hated him when I covered him at the Inquirer. He hated me. He didn't speak to me the second half of the first season I was there with him. But over time, I learned the genius of him, which was, regardless of what you want to say, never won a playoff game here. Buddy Ryan got more people to pay attention to the Eagles. They have a bigger fan base today because Buddy Ryan got them excited. Mm-hmm. A lot of it was based on total BS, all right? But he delivered it with such a style that it connected with Philadelphia. He connected as a coach or manager. He connected with the city as well as anyone I've ever seen. So by the end, I had patched it up with him, and I think we both saw what we both were doing to connect with the fan base, and we had our own ways of doing it. But man, he was good at that, and I don't take that away from him, even though he did not have the success he thought he would have, and a lot of people thought he would have.
Number two, you've said that Wilt Chamberlain is your favorite player of all time. How come?
When I was a kid, I was a contrarian. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, so I rooted against the Boston teams. And the rival was the Philadelphia 76ers for the Celtics. And he played a game in Providence. He came there. They used to play occasionally real season games against the Celtics. And I just watched him. I went right down near the front, near courtside, and watched him play. And I was just spellbound. He was so big and so strong and so dominant that I loved the guy. And I got to meet him years later when he came on a book tour of his own, and he didn't disappoint me. He was larger than life, literally.
Your former colleague Keith Jones is now the president of hockey operations for the Flyers. Can Jonesy and Danny Briere turn things around?
If anyone can, Jonesy can, because the Flyers finally realized they needed somebody running their organization who understood the fans, who made a connection with the fans. I have worked with a lot of people in my life. Keith Jones is the easiest guy I've ever had to work with, the guy I have the highest respect for, because he works his job, he knows what he's doing, and nobody has better people skills than Keith Jones. Keith knows enough not to jump in the deep end of personnel evaluation and stuff like that. Briere seems to know what he's doing there. If Jonesy is given enough time and finds the right people around him, Keith Jones will bring the Flyers back. I know I'm already rooting for him a lot harder than I ever have before, because I love that guy.
Yeah. Number four, how distraught are you, Angelo, that the San Francisco Giants fired Gabe Kapler?
I was in San Francisco. This is such a bizarre story. I was going on a wine country tour, and I drove past Safeco Stadium. It took me there from the airport up to Napa Valley. And as I was going by, I said to my wife, Gail, I said, that's where that jerk Gabe Kapler works. Little did I know, while that was going on, while I was passing him, he was getting fired. I couldn't stand the guy for one simple reason. He wasn't honest. He wasn't honest with the fans. He didn't respect them enough. So he failed here and he failed there. Maybe that's it for Gabe.
Finally, with Jay Black and Rhea Hughes, you're part of a fun weekly podcast called The TV Show. You're something of a TV addict, aren't you?
More than you could ever know. I love watching TV. And this is an era where you never run out of things to watch. There's always great stuff out. If you want to see something great right now on Netflix, and I hate soccer, they've got a 4-part series on David Beckham that will blow your mind. It's so great. It's that good. And that's it. When I find something great, Chet, the first thing I want to do is tell other people about it. And I'm able to do it on that podcast. And I'm not getting paid for that. I'm not doing any other podcasts. You don't hear me on sports podcasts or stuff like that, except ones like you got here as a guest. But I'm a regular on there because I love television. I just love it. My whole life I have.
I love your recent review of that naked dating show on Max.
Oh, God. You should have seen when my wife walked in and it was on the screen. Not good. Not good.
Oh, man. Angelo, I know you're going to be doing several book signings after Loud officially comes out on Black Friday, and you have one of them on December 1st. Yeah, you and our friend Ray Didinger. That's December 1st at the Center City Barnes and Noble, 6 p.m. Ray Diddy is one of my favorite people in the world, so I know that is going to be a great evening.
It's an honor, and I hope when people are there, they will look at his book, Finished Business, which is one of the best sports memoirs I've ever read in my whole life. And if people do want, now that I have them in hand, I'm going to be sending them out very shortly. If people want to order a personalized copy, where I'll write down there whatever you want me to write, or I'll just personalize it myself, go to angelocataldi.com. We are taking orders now, and any day now, we're going to start filling them. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait. I will definitely be getting a copy. Check out the website, angelocataldi.com, the weekly podcast, the TV show, and be sure to order the book Loud, hitting bookstores everywhere November 28th. Angelo, this was loads of fun. Thank you so much.
I'll come back anytime, Chad. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, hey, Chet, that was really good.
Angelo was great, man. He was just so friendly, so personable, and I think he really did enjoy himself. How about that?
Yeah, and I was sitting there thinking as this was going on, I was thinking we had Mike Messinelli on,
yeah,
and we've had Angelo on, and in both cases, I think what we came out of this with was really good guys. I going in, I didn't necessarily expect that feel that way, but coming out, I certainly do.
I love that part of the conversation where I asked him about, his radio persona versus his real life persona. And they do kind of start to blend, I would think, over the years. So, yeah, that was fun. And I think he's going to be on with us again at some point, Bill, because he had such a good time. He's open to doing that.
Good stuff.
Yep.
And I'm sure the Philly sports scene is going to give him and us plenty to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Well, hey, it is prediction time. And, so before we get to this week's picks, how are you, Bob Patrone Jr., Boop to his friends, doing through week 7 on both our picks and our margin of victory pool?
Bill, we had some major developments on both fronts in week 7. For one thing, you suffered your first loss in the margin of victory pool, so I was able to expand my lead there as a result. More on that in a couple of minutes. But in our regular pick'em pool, we were all terrible. You and Boop were both 1-3. I was a dreadful 0-4. And yes, as PJ and others have pointed out, I picked the Dolphins to beat the Eagles. I'm glad I was wrong, but it cost me. I was 0-4. So for the season there, Boop has now taken over the top spot at 18-10. I'm 1 game back at 17-11. You stay 3 back of Boop at 15-13. All right.
Yep. And we'll get to it. But New England beat Buffalo. What in the heck?
Go
All
figure.
right, let's go.
A lot of upsets.
NFC East picks this week, week 8. We added Minnesota at Green Bay. The Vikings are -1. Who you got?
Well, let me see. You know the drill. I did not look at Boop's picks. Boop says Vikings at Packers. Repeat after me. Short week letdown. He's taking the Packers. How about that? I'm taking Minnesota. They impressed me, by beating San Fran the other night. I know it's a road game after a Monday night game. I know there's that whole thing, but I'm taking the Vikings to beat Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm taking the Vikings too. I think they're going to get this thing turned around a little bit, start to play a little better. I'm taking the Vikings. How about next? The Jets and the Giants playing in their same stadium, but the Giants are the home team. Jets -3.
All right. Boop says Jets haven't lost since October 1st. Giants haven't scored more than 16 points since week 2. He's taking the Jets. I'm also taking the Jets.
And I'm taking the Jets too. The Giants still stink.
Yes, they do.
The Rams visit Dallas. The Cowboys are -6.5.
All right. The Boopster says Dallas comes off a bye. LA let another one slip away last week. He's taking the Cowboys. I hate to do it, but I'm also taking the Cowboys.
Yeah, I am too. Eagles visit Washington. Eagles are -6.5. I hope this isn't one of those trap games, Jet.
Yeah. Let's see. Boop says Birds might have the division clinched before I start my Christmas shopping. That's Boop. I don't know about that.
That's 2 more months for me.
But yeah. Hey, Christmas is 2 months from today. How about that?
There you go.
Boop is taking the Eagles. I'm taking the Eagles, but that 6.5 point line tells me it's probably going to be right around there, like a touchdown.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit closer of a game, but I sure like the way the Eagles came back and played against the Dolphins. So
all right, now the margin of victory thing, Bill. I'm going to put up the standings. As we mentioned, you lost because the Bills somehow lost to New England. I took the Seahawks, as did Boop, and they won. So, yeah, I have expanded my lead, but it does get a whole lot tougher now because we can't reuse the teams. So for this week, my pick is the Chargers to beat whoever the hell they're playing. I forget.
The Chargers. I don't know who they're playing either, but I am. Who'd Boop take?
Oh, Boop. Let me see. Oh, Boop took his Kansas City Chiefs. He loves the Chiefs.
Okay. All right. And I am going to take the Ravens. Ravens over the Cardinals.
Baltimore Ravens.
I really, my first one I wrote down, I'll just share this with you, I was going to take the Bengals over the 49ers with Brock Purdy and concussion protocol, but wow. I talked myself out of it and went Ravens over Cardinals. We'll see what happens.
Probably a wise move. Okay, Kansas City for Chargers for me, Ravens for you. Got it.
All right. Well, Chet, let's get back to it and see what's going on with Bob Cavanaugh and the gang at Cavs Philly tailgates.
Well, they've been cooking up terrific catering business for more than 30 years. They're known for their tailgate parties. Cavs is a 3-time winner of Philly Tailgate's Jack Daniels Great American Tailgate Party Contest and a past winner of the Philly Daily News Tailgate Award. Cavs also does corporate events and parties. And if you check their website, you'll know that they do all the Eagles home games. They just did the Dolphins game this past Sunday. The next couple of good games, the Cowboys and the Bills in November. Oh, November 5th. That's kind of fast approaching, and it's the day before my birthday. Maybe somebody will buy me tickets for that Eagles-Cowboys game and the Philly tailgate from Cav. Order your tickets for these tailgates via the website, phillytailgates.com. Check the site, and if you have any questions, you can email them at cavscatering@verizon.net. Cavs Philly tailgates is the way to go, Bill.
All right, you bet. Well, hey, Chet, great guest tonight at Dei Lynam and Angelo Cataldi. We definitely covered all the bases. Who's coming to Philly Press Box Radio next week?
Well, Bill, I just locked up one guest about an hour before the show, as a matter of fact. And as I said, we're going to do a little Phillies autopsy type thing next week. And we're going to be joined by Tim Kelly, who covers the Phillies for Phillies Nation. He does such a great job. He was all over the place covering them. He was out in Arizona last weekend. Tim Kelly from Phillies Nation will be back to help us figure out what the Phillies need to do this offseason. And in addition to that, I can't even find my notes. So, I remember. Yes, it's this guy, legendary Philadelphia Flyer, Joe Watson. I will be chatting with him. That one will be taped. Tim will be with us live, but I'll have a taped interview with Joe Watson on the eve of his induction into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame next Thursday. So, Joe, a 2-time Flyers Cup winning dude. He's a real character and always fun to talk with. Tim Kelly and Joe Watson next week.
Could be fun for sure. All right. Anything else before we wrap it up?
Wow, we somehow squeezed everything into this fast-paced hour. We didn't talk about Penn State. Good. They got Indiana this weekend?
Yes.
And then they got Michigan coming up soon at Happy Valley. So hopefully that will go well. Who knows?
All right, let's wrap this thing up. Let's thank tonight's special guests, Dei Lynam and Angelo Cataldi, our sponsors, the Irish Rover Station House, Cavs Philly Tailgates, PPCC 118 Raz Room, and Dave Lavoie of Allstate Insurance in Westchester, PA. For Jim Chet Chesko, this is Bill Furman. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll join Philly Press Box Radio next Wednesday, November the 1st already at 7 p.m. You can see us live on Facebook, listen to our website one day. PhillyPressBoxRadio.com, on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and all the others. High hopes, Philadelphia sports fans, and go Birds.
And happy Halloween also.
Happy trails to you till we meet again.